guys, Mike here, and we're back out at Bullet Creek to wrap up our evaluation of our 3 pistol upper builds in alternative calibers for the AR-15 pistol. Now, the last time we were out looking at these, we forgot to bring one of our ammunitions out, this gun ammunition 130 grain ammunition. So today we're going to start by measuring the muzzle velocity out of an 8.5 inch barrel using this 130 grain 300 Blackout supersonic ammunition. Then we'll do a little calculation so we can see what our muzzle energy is. Then at that point we want to go ahead and look at the ballistics gel of these personal defense rounds. These are the rounds that we're going to look at in the ballistics gel, and the order we're going to look at them. We'll look at this double tap rifle defense round. We're going to look at this both in the 16 inch barrel and in our 8.5 inch barrel. Then we'll check out the ballistics gel result using this 90 grain Federal Gold Dot bullet out of an 8.5 inch barrel. We've seen very good performance using this round out of a 14.5 inch barrel. Then in the 300 Blackout, we're going to look at these 2 rounds, the 130 grain SOST by Gun and the 110 grain TAC TX by Barnes. And the only round we have that's a personal defense round for a 7.62 by 39 is this Winchester PDX-1, which uses a 120 grain bullet. Alright, so first we're going to look at this 130 grain 300 Blackout gun ammunition. We'll measure the muzzle velocity, calculate the muzzle energy, and then we'll look at our ballistics gel test. 1922, 1945, 1951. Let's do a little calculation. So this 130 grain 300 Blackout gun ammunition out of an 8.5 inch barrel gave us an average muzzle velocity of 1,932 feet per second, which equates to 1,077 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So now let's take a look at how all these rounds perform in ballistics gel. This is the 6.8 SPC double tap out of an 8.5 inch barrel, traveling 2,220 feet per second and delivering 1,204 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And what we see is that it opens up immediately as far as the permanent wound channel. At about 1 inch, we start developing a very nice permanent wound channel. The large permanent wound channel starts to taper down at about 8 to 9 inches. And then the penetration is all the way to 16 inches with a very nice expansion in bare gel. So here's the result from the 6.8 double tap ammunition. The top track is from the 8.5 inch barrel and the bottom track is from the 16 inch barrel. They both started expanding right away, and by 1 inch you're starting to see a pretty significant permanent wound channel. The permanent wound channel from the 16 inch barrel is larger. For a longer period of time, you have this large amount of shrapnel. There's this burst of shrapnel at about 8 inches. And then the 16 inch barrel actually penetrated about 15.5 inches versus 16 inches out of the shorter barrel. Both have good expansion. You can see the mushrooming here. We'll go ahead and retrieve these bullets. We were having some technical difficulties with our high frame rate camera, so we're going to go back out and try to finish up the rest of the ballistics gel test with these other uppers. But let's take a look at these bullets. We'll go ahead in here with a hemostat. Okay, this is out of the 8.5 inch barrel. We'll weigh that and measure it. And then out of the 16 inch barrel, So this is the 16-inch barrel projectile. And you have separation of the core from the jacket there. This is the Federal 90 grain gold dot, traveling at 2559 feet per second, delivering 1,300 foot-pounds of energy. We get good opening at 1 inch, significant permanent wound channel, about 8 inches, starts to taper down at about 9 inches. Then the bullet tracks. You have good mushrooming, and a total of about right at 16 inches of penetration. There's the bullet. You can see very good mushrooming and 16 inches of penetration. There's the wound channel. So here in the center you have the gun, 130 grain. This round is traveling 1,932 feet per second and delivering 1,077 foot-pounds of energy. And it's this center track right here. You can see a really narrow track. And then there's this stretch cavity right here. Yeah. You can see this stretch cavity right here. That's probably about 3 inches in greatest dimension, and that's at about 9 to 10 inches from the entrance. And then the tract spirals out and actually exits, enters the 2x12 backstop, and then penetrates the 2x12. So some significant over penetration. It looks like this projectile went completely through this 2x12. I've been digging through this channel and have gone from one side to the other side, and so there is no metal. It completely penetrated through 16 inches of gel and then a pine 2x, and then exited the back of the 2x12. This is the Barnes Vortex 300 Blackout, traveling at 2182 feet per second. Now we're getting a lot of tracks here, but let's just point to this. It's this tract here. You have a tract above, a tract below, and this middle track right here. Is the Barnes tract. It goes behind, at this point, this other tract. Here you see that at about 1 inch you have a permanent wound channel that's fairly small, actually, smaller than I expected. It's less than 1 inch in diameter. Starts at about 1 inch. And then we're going to have to turn this around. Let's just flip this gel block over a little bit. And let's look from the top. If we get from this angle, I think we can see the tract better. The tract comes right here. This is the tract. Okay, here we can see the tract emerging here. This middle tract is the Barnes tract right here, and you can actually see at this point the black polymer tip is right here. So there's the tract at 16 inches. So it penetrated 16 inches. The tract is fairly narrow all the way through. Dump the black tip right at 16 inches, and then there's the round. Let's dig that out and see what it looks like, and we'll also extract this little black polymer tip. So here's the Barnes projectile. It was embedded in the 2x12, but did not penetrate through the 2x12. So it went through 16 inches and then, embedded, but was fairly easy just to pull out. There's the little ballistic tip that was left in the gel at about 16 inches. So you have very good petal formation. We'll take these back to the shop and measure and weigh these. Now we went ahead and took out the 90 grain gold dot, and once again, just beautiful expansion and mushrooming, petal formation. This is the Winchester PDX-1. The entrance is right here, very narrow tract. You can see the tract as it runs along right here. And then it has a permanent wound channel starting at about 9 inches. You can see that the wound channel spreads out to about 1 inch in greatest diameter, right about here. Then the wound channel closes down at about 12 inches. The tract diverts downward and actually exits the bottom of the gel block right here. It went through the back of our supporting 2x12 here, entered our backstop 2x12, and was actually just lying between the backstop 2x12 and the cinder block, and the projectile is right here. It did not expand. Kind of reminds me of that Burger VLDL round that we tried before. And so we'll take all of these projectiles back to the shop. Okay, we're back in the shop with the projectiles that we've recovered. Let's review what we found. We have our 3 short barrel uppers and the 3 different calibers that we will now eventually mate up with a pistol lower like this one seen here. And then we have our rounds. These are 5 out of the 6 rounds that we fired in ballistics gel. We did not recover one, so let's just review what we found with the ballistics gel with each of these rounds. We'll start with the 7.62 by 39. Using this Winchester PDX, this is the projectile that we recovered. Recall that out of this 7 3/4 inch barrel, this round was traveling at 1,820 feet per second, which equated to 883 foot-pounds of energy. This round over-penetrated, and it obviously did not expand. You can see the tip. It did retain all of its weight. This is an enclosed bullet. The back is encased in copper. So it did retain all of its weight. It penetrated 16 inches of gel and went through a 2x12 and was stopped by the cinder block behind the 2x12, so we were able to recover this projectile. Now, I'm not knocking this round, this Winchester PDX round, but in our test we're looking at how these rounds perform in a very short barrel. But certainly in our test, I think we've shown that if you're going to use a barrel that's 7 3/4 inch long in this caliber, then you're probably just as well off using the cheap Wolf full metal jacket steel cased ammo at 22 to 25 cents a round, and it just wouldn't be worth paying the $1.50 round price that this personal defense ammo cost, unless you're using a longer barrel. Now, in the 300 Blackout, this gun ammunition, we wanted to check this 130 grain SOST bullet. This is a projectile that's developed for the 308 Winchester, and this company loaded this projectile in a 300 Blackout case. And remember what we saw with this 130 grain bullet was a velocity of only 1932 feet per second and a muzzle energy of 1,077 foot-pounds. There again, maybe out of a longer barrel, this round would get enough velocity that it might expand, but it just doesn't expand, and it over-penetrates when you're shooting it out of such a short barrel. Now the 300 Blackout Barnes Vortex, which is the 110 grain Barnes bullet, did very well. This round did go through the ballistics gel, so it penetrated 16 inches of ballistics gel, but then it just impaled itself in the board. So if there was any over penetration, it would be a relatively small amount beyond the 18 inches of gel that the FBI is looking for. So I think this did very well. It retains 99% of its original weight, and it expanded to 185% of its original diameter with an expansion of 0.57 inches. And it's just a beautiful bullet. This has a very good reputation. So certainly, if you're going to use a very short barrel, like in our build with an 8.5 inch barrel and 300 Blackout, then this round is going to give you very good performance with a very reasonable amount of muzzle energy, approaching what you would see out of a carbine length barrel with 5.56 rounds. And then in the 6.8, we looked at this rifle defense ammo. Now, one thing we did differently with this is we did compare the 16-inch barrel to the 8.5-inch barrel that we were using in our test. This is the projectile that we recovered from the 8.5-inch barrel. You can see very wide expansion of these petals. Good mushrooming. This delivered 2,220 feet per second out of the very short barrel, which equated to 1,204 foot-pounds of energy. This penetrated 15 3/4 of an inch. So excellent penetration. This rifle defense round out of the 8.5-inch barrel retained 86% of its weight, and it expanded to 315% of its original diameter, reaching a diameter of 0.85 inches. Now out of the 16-inch barrel, we had actually an even larger, nicer wound channel. This is the projectile recovered from the shot out of the 16-inch barrel. With the 16-inch barrel, we got 2,583 feet per second, delivering 1,630 foot-pounds of energy. This actually penetrated about 1/2 of an inch less. This penetrated 15 1/4 inches in our ballistics gel. So good penetration, no over penetration. It expanded to 267% of its original diameter, reaching a diameter of 0.72 inches. And it retained about 75% of its original weight. So with the faster velocity in the 16-inch barrel, this round dumped a little bit more weight, didn't travel quite as far in the ballistics gel, but had a very nice permanent wound channel. And then it takes us to our 90 grain gold dot loaded by Federal. This is the bullet we've recovered. It penetrated just under 16 inches. Very good mushrooming. Remember, this round out of a 8.5-inch barrel travels 2,559 feet per second and delivers 1,309 foot-pounds of energy. The weight retention was excellent with this bullet. This bullet retained 97% of its original weight, and it expanded to 240% of its original diameter, reaching a diameter of 0.65 inches. And this was also the least expensive of our personal defense rounds. So what have we discovered with the building and testing of these three alternative calibers for the AR-15 pistol with very short barrels? We found that all three of these calibers can be made to run reliably. We've also experimented with some of the rounds. We found that the 6.8 is the most powerful. The 7.62 by 39 is the least expensive to shoot. And the 300 Blackout offers an intermediate amount of energy between these three calibers. But it offers the subsonic rounds if you do want to shoot very quietly suppressed. So each one of these calibers has something to bring to the table. And I think at this point, hopefully you can use the information that we've given you and decide which round, which caliber, and which build might best suit your needs. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please post those and I'll try to respond to those in a timely fashion. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.